Her triumphs. I took a group of women that didn't believe in themselves, and I just believed in them. Her trials.
I never wanted to go to practice. I was losing a ton of weight.
Her story.
I just put my faith in God and just trusted the system.
Her why.
I want people to see what I did and say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to be better than that. That would be how I hope that this journey ends.
This is Her Why, where we tell the stories from BYU women's sports. Here is your host, Lauren McLean.
We're so glad you've joined us for Her Why, where we celebrate the women who make BYU sports great. Today's guest is grad student and recent transfer from Washington State University, turned libero for the BYU women's volleyball team, Aria McComber. Thank you so much for coming on with me, Aria.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm so excited for this opportunity.
Well, you are incredible, not only in women's volleyball, but in life. I'm so excited to hear about your story. So you go by Aria, but that's not your real first name. How do you pronounce your first name? Because I read it on your bio and I couldn't even guess. So how do you pronounce it?
Well, I have a traditional Hawaiian name. It's 42 letters long. It's Kili'i Ake Kaia Puka Maka Hanai Kapolio Kealoha. And it was given to me by my uncle. We have a tradition. Whoever can speak Hawaiian fluently and knows the knowledge of our culture super extensively and dreams of the child gets the rights to name them. So my uncle had a dream about me before my mom knew I was pregnant. So,
wow. Yeah. So what was your mom's reaction when your uncle said, this is what her name's going to be?
Well, we all kind of have long names. Mine is definitely more on the longer side.
Yeah.
But my mom was just super excited. She wasn't expecting me. And so they just thought it would be a blessing to the family.
I love that. Do you remember at what age you were like, okay, I can finally pronounce my name? Because as a little kid, you're probably like, if someone asks you your name, you're like, how do I tell them this? At what age could you actually start pronouncing it?
Oh, that was a struggle because all legal documents, all like standardized tests, like you need to have your name memorized. And I think I was able to say it for sure in the 4th grade. But even now, I need to look at a paper sometimes to like make sure 100% this is it.
Yeah.
And actually on my passport, it's so long that I have an extra page on it.
Oh my gosh.
It creates some complications, but I think it creates a cool story I could tell people at the same time.
It's a gorgeous name. I absolutely love it. But you decided to go by Aria. How did you come about that name?
So in our family, we have a lot of traditions.
Yeah.
So typically it's a Hawaiian first name and the middle names are English name. And they've all just kind of been A's. So like my mom has a A middle name. My auntie has an A middle name. My little sister got lucky. They learned that the first name being Hawaiian is very hard. So her first name is an A. So she gets Alexandria in her first name and her Hawaiian name is in the middle.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So is that what your mom and your siblings call you? Do they call you Aria?
Yes. So because I'm slightly named after my mom, Kili'i, she got to be called Kili'i, and so they defaulted to my middle name, Aria.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I love it. You're from Kapolei, Hawaii. Is that
Kapolei.
Kapolei. Kapolei. No, thank you, because I was like, okay, how do you pronounce it? Is that where you grew up for most of your childhood?
Yes. So it's on the west side of Oahu, kind of desertish, but now it's a booming city. We got 3 malls there. I'm jealous.
Desertish in Hawaii, huh? That's not something you'd think about. What was it like growing up there?
Well, so I had a complicated upbringing. I technically lived with my grandparents in Kapolei, but my mom lived in Nanakuli. And so I was kind of going back and forth in between houses. And at first it was great. Like I have a ton of friends, ton of different experiences. But what really struck me was in Kapolei, I lived kind of next to the landfill that's over there. And in a Hawaiian culture, we're taught malama the aina and like protect it, keep it clean, make it better. And that's ultimately what led me to my master's in environmental science. And so that upbringing had a huge impact on how I see the world and how we should impact our world.
That's incredible. So how many siblings do you have?
That is a hard question. I love my family, super grateful. It is very confusing, even to our family some days. We're trying to remember, how are we connected? I would say I have around like 10 siblings, but we're all like half siblings. And even our half siblings have half siblings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your family dynamic like growing up? You mentioned you lived with your grandparents some of the time. You lived with your mom some of the time. What was your family dynamic like with your mom and your siblings?
I would say my mom just didn't have the means to take care of me at that time. And so my grandparents took me in so I could still be with the family. And which kind of separated me from some of my family members or my siblings. My dad has siblings that I got to meet and get closer to in high school, but our family's so big, there's even siblings on the Big Island from my brother's side. And so I didn't get to see them a lot except for holidays, but when we did come together, it was just always as if we were a family.
So obviously, I'm sure your mom was trying her very, very best to do what she could, right? How has your mom inspired you throughout your life up to this point?
Yeah, my mom's definitely been a big role model in my life. She showed me that you can go through anything, that as long as you like put your heart and soul and are doing it with good intentions. She doesn't always get things done the right way, but she does things always with the best intentions, full heart. And I think people follow suit in trying to make whatever she needs done. And I really look up to how driven and strong of a woman my mom is. She makes her needs very well known, and what she wants done gets done because of that.
So you don't come from the most traditional family, which honestly, the majority of people probably don't, right? How do you feel like that has impacted you and your drive and what you've become now? Just growing up in a more non-traditional family.
Personally, I don't think it affected me as much growing up non-traditionally, but what I do think is cool was like my family, my parents all played volleyball, my siblings all played volleyball, and so that created a drive in me too to play volleyball. I remember a family gathering when we're all together, I got kicked out of a pepper circle because I wasn't good enough, and I went, okay, well, watch me, and begged my mom to teach me volleyball, and here I am now.
Wow.
And so I think just seeing how my siblings have succeeded, like my brother playing in the 2008 Olympics, Clay Stanley, seeing how he's able to compete at such a high level, and then my other siblings, Noah Hain here at BYU, John Stanley, Will Stanley at BYU, and I have a younger brother at USC on their men's volleyball team. Just seeing them and be competitive also drove me to be better in the sport I love.
So were you always surrounded by volleyball? Like, was volleyball always the sport of the family, or was there something else?
For sure. I joke with people, they ask like, oh, when did you start playing volleyball? And I said, out of the womb. Like, I think volleyball almost wasn't a choice in my family. You could play it. Like, we have some siblings who didn't want to go at a collegiate level, but it cultivated a love for me and competitiveness. I got to see what they loved about it and in turn made it my own.
And speaking of your grandfather, Tom Hain was captain of the 1968 U.S. Olympic team, one of the leading men's volleyball players at the time. So volleyball obviously runs in the family. When did you know for yourself that it was something you loved and wanted to pursue?
That's a good question. I was super young, but I would want to say I was around maybe 7 when I knew I really wanted to play volleyball. I didn't know what that entailed. I did not know I wanted to go to college. I just knew I wanted to play volleyball in whatever capacity I could have. And so I joined like a park league and just got involved in so many different things that whatever volleyball could be, bringing a volleyball to school. And then I think I really made the switch when I turned maybe 12, 13. I just looked up to watching like the University of Hawaii girls play on TV and going to their games and like, I want to be like that. How do I be like that? To the point where I actually got coached by the University of Hawaii coaches on my club team who really helped push me to become a collegiate athlete.
And you seem like you're very competitive.
Very.
And did your family help you with that competitiveness, kind of pushed you along?
I say help me or hurt me in some situations. It's a good thing. Some things I got to learn to let go. Yeah. But overall, I think I'm competitive and driven, which is obviously shown in my academics as well. So I don't think it's a bad trait I have.
Oh, it's a wonderful trait. Your position on the court is defensive specialist or libero, and you stand out from the rest of the team by your jersey. Tell us about, for those who aren't super familiar with volleyball, what exactly do you do in your position as a libero?
So as a libero, you're in charge of running the back row. And so that's specifically serve receive, defensive patterns, and even just talking to your blockers, like what they're doing and what you're seeing, and just constantly giving feedback. I know the setter's known as the quarterback, but I think like the libero and anyone in the back row, like a DS, is part of the glue that holds it together.
What do you like most about that position for yourself?
I like the challenge that comes with digging a hard hit. I think there's so many great hitters in the world, and when you get that dig and just keep it alive and they just get frustrated, it's just like a aha moment to them. It's like, I got it. It shows a lot of grit because in that position, you fail a lot. I will say there's a lot of holes, there's great hitters, spaces they can hit. And when you finally read it correctly and get a good dig, it's like the best feeling in the world.
Well, you are so good at it. You're so much fun to watch. Did you ever try any other positions before you settled on libero, or was it kind of libero from the beginning?
I actually was an outside growing up. So
Really?
along with my whole family being D1 players, I'm pretty sure almost all my siblings, maybe minus 2, are above 6'2". And I was supposed to be 6'4", what the doctor said. I'm 5'4".
Wow.
So super off. And so I trained as an outside, thinking I was like, oh, I'm going to be tall,
Yeah.
I'm going to be big. And I get to play all around defense. I get to
Right.
hit a ball. And obviously in high school, I realized I'm probably not going to grow much anymore. And colleges were looking for liberos who are feisty, who attack the ball, even though you're supposed to you're receiving the ball. It's a mindset, the mindset of attacking it. And I had that as an outside. And so when I went to Washington State my first year, that was my first time ever being an actual libero role, only a
Wow.
back row role.
So it wasn't until you got to college that you started playing only libero.
Yes.
That's crazy. You're like, why am I not growing? What's going? The doctor said.
I know, I was praying.
When did you? So speaking of Washington State, when was it that you knew that playing volleyball was in the cards for you at the next level?
I got on a pretty competitive team my freshman year for club, and we all kind of had the goals. We said it wasn't about playing time, it was about getting to the next level. And a bunch of us were sending emails to coaches, calling coaches, going to combines. And one combine my sophomore year, I got looked at by Washington State and BYU. And that's when, and a couple other colleges, those are my top ones, because obviously I'm at them and went to them.
Right.
And I just knew this could be a reality for me. I just need to keep plugging in the work and showing what I got and putting myself out there, and this could become my dream come true.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear about Aria's stint at Washington State, her decision to come to BYU, and getting baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is Her Why. Welcome back to Her Why. I'm Lauren McLean, continuing my conversation with BYU women's volleyball libero, Aria McComber. So how did you end up choosing Washington State University after high school?
That is a funny story, and it relates back to BYU. So as I was saying, my sophomore year, I was at a combine. I got looked at by Washington State and BYU. I was given the opportunity to go visit both colleges, and ultimately I chose Washington State at the time. And I don't regret it. I think that was the right decision for the path I needed. I just connected really well to the coaches and the girls. The crazy thing is I connected to the coaching staff and the girls a lot on religion. Washington State team at that time was very Christian-based, which is funny because so is BYU, they're of the church. And I think I just wasn't ready to take that step yet at that time to understand really what is the LDS religion. And I think that kind of pushed me away at the time.
Right. So you did grow up a Christian then?
Yes, a Protestant Christian.
A Protestant Christian. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that drew you to Washington State was you connect with a lot of the girls on that basis. Mm-hmm. That is so awesome. What was the transition like living on your own in a different state and then having to play Division I volleyball? What was that transition like for you?
I don't think it was super hard living on my own. I had a different schedule than my parents. My parents are very early birds, early to bed, and practices in high school went to 10 p.m. sometimes. And so I was kind of towards my end of high school years learning to become more independent, which helped me at Washington State. It wasn't that hard to transition, but I think what was hard was the load of volleyball. I didn't know how much of my life was going to be consumed by it. I don't mind it, but I didn't know how much at that time.
Right.
Which definitely made me need to change some of my priorities in my life. I wasn't able to be as social as I used to be or as involved in community stuff as I used to be in high school because I needed to prioritize being a D1 student athlete.
Right. So it sounds like you're a pretty social person. So was that something that was hard for you to be like, oh, I can't hang out with my friends as much as I want to? Was that kind of hard for you at first?
I would say no, but it's because I didn't manage my time well. Sleep definitely suffered.
So you still hung out with your friends.
And then when I was like, okay, I see how this is affecting me outside of volleyball and school, so I need to lessen that and just make those times more intentional versus hanging out with friends till 2 a.m. So I had to learn how to prioritize. So I said goodbye at 10 p.m. Yeah, that kind of deal.
Good thing you were only 18 years old and your body can handle it, right? You played in 29 matches and 74 sets as a redshirt freshman at Washington State. Were you expecting that much playing time when you first arrived?
No, not at all. I actually asked for a red shirt when I got there because we had 3 liberos and we typically only played with one libero, one DS.
Yeah.
And so I knew I needed that time to develop. And I didn't know how much faith they had in me until the next season, that they really saw good potential in me and wanted to make me a libero, which they did for my last season.
So how was that? Because you mentioned that was the first time you played libero.
Yeah.
Was in Division I college. So what was that transition like for you at the beginning? Because I'm sure there had to be some sort of learning curve.
Definitely was, because within like my normal practices as an outside, like you are very well-rounded. And as a libero, you start to become super focused. And I was a little worried that I would get bored. I'm like, well, all I can do is serve, receive, and pass and dig a ball. But I actually ended up loving it a lot more than when I was just an outside that played all around, because I was able to specialize. I started to perfect like one-handed saves or chucks or sprawls, double pushes, which are all volleyball moves that I don't think I would have explored otherwise. It was definitely hard because the other girls were always liberos and I wasn't. And so, but I had good mentorship there from my previous teammates, and they took me under their wing, and it made that transition a lot easier.
When you look back, how do you feel like you did in those first 2 seasons as a libero?
Oh, my first season was a little rough. I just think I let the crowd affect me too much, and just like, oh, I've realized my dream, putting too much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And then my senior season, or my last season there, when I was the libero, I was just letting that go. And I think it definitely helped me perform a lot better. Like realizing I'm not always going to be the best passer on the team. I'm not always going to have the most digs or most this, but I could always do my best. Definitely helped me my last year there. Sorry. It's kind of complicated when you have 2, being a grad student and Washington State, it's rough.
Yeah. Well, when you look back at Washington State, how would you describe kind of your overall experience that you had there? Because obviously you ended up transferring to BYU, but what was your overall experience at Washington State like?
There was a lot of good and a lot of bad things, but I like to focus more on the good right now. And I think it definitely shaped me to the person who I am today as well, where I learned to speak up for myself with things that I disagreed with and stand up for others, and also just stick to my goals. I think there was a lot of different temptations at Washington State. It's a huge party school.
Yeah.
But I knew what I wanted out of my collegiate career, and that was I wanted a degree, and I wanted to be the best I could be. And some of those things conflicted, and just learning to make those decisions, I think, really helped me prepare for the next step in my life.
And speaking of your degree, as you were kind of inching closer to graduation, what was your plan? What was going through your mind?
Oh, there's so much. So I was potentially going to stay at Washington State, but I just had a feeling that my time there was done. I didn't think I was a super big fit for the goals I wanted. I think other people had different goals in mind in the program than I did, and so I just knew my time was done there. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go work a job or if I wanted to pursue a master's. I was leaning towards a master's because I still had 3 years of eligibility, which is absolutely unheard of. When I entered the transfer portal after Washington State, kind of deciding what I was going to do, I kind of found this other college. I don't know if I should name them for respect for them because they helped me out a lot. That was going to get me into their master's program. And it's super hard to get into, very prestigious college. And everything was set. I did my interview for them, and I was just waiting for my acceptance letter, which I knew I was going to get. And I just had this feeling to call Dave. He's the assistant coach for BYU. A few months prior, the NCAA tournament was in a bubble, and I did COVID testing next to BYU. And Heather Olmstead actually came up to me, remembering me 6 years later from the last time we ever talked, and asked me how I was doing. And that just stuck with me. So I just had this feeling to call Dave. I was like, I'll just shoot him a message, see if they need a libero. I just felt like I just didn't give them a shot to really learn what they have to offer. And so I did that. Dave was like, hey, can you call in 5 minutes? I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not ready for this. And he just talked to me about what my goals are, what BYU could offer me. And I just was like, tell me more. How can I make this work? And then I got my acceptance from that other university. And Dave, Heather, Johnny are working their butts off trying to get me into BYU. To caveat, I do have the academics for it.
Yeah.
So I'm not like athletics just gets you in. I do have the academic background and work ethic for it and the testing scores. And I just had to say no to that other offer. And waited on Dave them, and then they offered me a scholarship. And I was just like, blown out of the blue, like, this is where I want to be. And since I've been here, it's just been life-changing, obviously, but my baptism and everything.
So would you say it was just kind of a feeling? Because you mentioned you're like, I need to call Dave. Like, was it just a feeling you had that you needed to do that, reach out to him?
Yeah, it was just a feeling. Like, I was in no contact with him prior. I was pretty much done with my recruiting, going to this other school. Like, I was looking at apartments and, like, figuring out contracts to sign for this other school. And I just had this strong feeling just to text him.
That is so incredible. I love that so much. So you, after a couple seasons with the Cougars in Washington, you joined the Cougars in Provo, Utah. That is so, so cool. How big of an adjustment was it? Because you felt so strongly to come here, and yet you kind of have to start over a little bit. So what was the adjustment like coming from Washington State to BYU?
It was definitely weird because you come from like an upperclassman position at Washington State to like a completely new team. And like I didn't want to be treated like the freshman. Love my freshmen. But I was lucky enough, there's 2 other grad transfers with me, Kenzie and Gretchen. And we just kind of just made our own way on the team, not like with the leadership that was already there. Like luckily BYU's volleyball team already has such a strong culture that is super easy to follow and agree with, that it's not hard to find where you fit within that team.
Oh, I love that so much. You get here, you start playing, and at what point was it like, ding, this is where I need to be? Was there a moment where you're like, or was it kind of the whole time you've been here where it's like, this is where I'm intended to be?
I would say almost like week 1 I got here. My academic journey at BYU has been very difficult. My original goal was an MBA, and the MBA school was not taking any student athletes at that time. And so I even talked to the coaches about even what if I came for a year and then went somewhere else afterwards and just brainstorming, and they were talking about what they're okay with and such. And then we got me into environmental science masters, which I loved. That was also like another master's I kind of wanted. I love academics.
You're in the right place then.
And so I told my coaches, hey, like, I don't know how long I'll be here, but when I'm here, I'll be here. And then I got into the program. I liked my program. I loved my team, loved my coaches, to the point where I was going to the MBA office like almost every other week and being like, hey, Dan Snow, like, how are you doing? Like, I'd love to be in your program if you ever accept athletes. We're good friends now.
Yeah.
He's the director for the MBA school, and they started piloting a program where student athletes could be a part of it. And I just told my coaches, I'm going to be here for 3 years, 4 years actually, only 3 years for your program. But I'm going to stay an extra year longer because I just very much am behind the BYU community, school, everything.
Oh my gosh. So things are working out for you athletically, academically, and not only that, but you were also recently baptized, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Kind of take us through that, because there's a whole lot there, right, to unpack. Let's go back to Washington State, because you mentioned that you met Lynette Hernez, who is the goalkeeper for the BYU women's soccer team, and she's also a convert to the church. So what part did she play in your conversion?
I love Lynette. Funny how we met. My roommate also was a part of the church at that time, and so they would go to church a bunch, and I actually was an academic mentor over Lynette, and so I'd have her over a bunch and just kind of got to hear her stories, and I really looked up and admired her story of like, she was having lunch with friends, and they were just talking about Jesus. Like, you don't hear people just talk about Jesus, and how much that stood out to her, which also then stood out to me, because as a high schooler, I was talking about boys, like, or volleyball.
Right.
And then even my roommate Charity, she would invite me to General Conference to watch with her and some of her missionary lessons. But I was just going for support for her because the church in Washington State wasn't the biggest. Like, they still had members who were strong, but it's just not that big. And she was the only member on her team, and I just didn't want her to feel left out.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that she invited me to those opportunities, which then played into me coming to BYU. Because of my exposure to them, I just knew the people in the church were just so kind and just had this light to them that I would be fine here even though I was a non-member. I also talked to my brothers about that. They said they were totally fine being non-members here. Everyone's super respectful. They felt very welcomed and loved. And so it made my decision easy. And ever since I've been here, I've just been having these tiny exposures to like the truth, God, Jesus Christ, Book of Mormon. And I don't think there's one event that really led to my baptism now that I got to like reflect on it. I used to tell people there was, but I think it's just the community pulled me in and just helped me feel like this is where I needed to be.
So amazing. What was your family's reaction, your parents and your brothers, when you told them that you decided to get baptized?
Well, so I'm dating a non-member, or I'm dating a member while I was a non-member.
Yeah,
excuse me. And so my brothers already had an idea. They figured. They're like, about time. And then my family, they weren't negative. I don't think they're like elastic.
Yeah.
But I think they're happy because we do come from a religious background. Anything bringing you closer to Christ, they're happy with. So like my mom was able to join on the Zoom call for my baptism for the part she was able to, that could be Zoomed. And like my whole family knows, and they're huge BYU fans. They love what BYU's for, even though they're not in the religion.
Yeah.
And I just think that shows so much love they have for me, and just like a great message that you don't have to believe the same thing as others, but you could be respectful and just support them in that way.
I love that so much. You've only been baptized for a couple of months now, but how do you feel like it's impacted your life up to this point?
That's funny. We just had a talk on Sunday with the missionaries came and saw me, and that's what they asked me. And the biggest impact I've seen is just the way I'm able to hold myself. I think there's a lot of situations where I tend to get really emotional or not thinking of the next step. And ever since I've been baptized, I've been able to take a step back and ask for guidance, which I think has been such a big blessing since I've been baptized. Just giving me that patience and that guidance I need.
It's so incredible. I love that so much. I got to know, what was the reaction of your boyfriend when you told him you were going to get baptized?
He was trying to be during the whole thing, he was trying to be supportive because he didn't want me to get baptized for him. So I started going to church with him to show him that I support him.
Right.
And I gave him a heads up, hey, I'm not a member. I don't really plan to be, but I want to show you that I'll support you.
Yeah.
And then it ended up me becoming curious, wanting to meet with the missionaries. And he just was expressing, I hope this is for yourself. This needs to be about your journey with Christ. And I was like, yeah, it is mine. To the point where I was going to lessons and I was like, hey, come to my lessons. He's like, well, I don't want to pressure you. I'm like, you're not pressuring me. Come join me.
Yeah.
And then when I told him I was going to get baptized, he was so elastic, and he just knew that this is where I needed to be.
What an incredible story. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing. What a year you've had, right? What a few years that you've had. And we're so glad you're here at BYU. You're doing an incredible job on the team. What would you say are some of the highlights from your volleyball season so far this year in the Big 12?
Oh, this year in the Big 12?
Yeah.
We just had a recent one where we just beat UCF. And the reason why I think that trip is going to stick with me for the rest of my life is because the previous weeks we lost to Kansas State, Texas, and we're feeling down. And we just made a plan. And just to see our whole team come together, that is something that's going to stick with me forever. The win for UCF is not just because it happened. We made it happen. And on top of that, we celebrated after. Got little bazookies. It was fun. That definitely will stick with me forever. And also the fans. I've said it since day one I got here that the thing I was most excited for BYU was the fans. They show up. They know us. They encourage us. And they just full-heartedly support us. And everywhere we go, there is always a BYU fan who stays after the games. After we talk for 20 minutes as a team, they stay after just so they get a chance to talk to us and hear our stories. And that's definitely one of my highlights. It's not even volleyball related. This is just life. And those memories will stay with me forever.
I'm speaking with Aria McComber from the BYU women's volleyball team. Aria, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your incredible story. You're just an incredible human being and can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Annie Robinson and Sydney Simpson for producing this episode with senior producer Cleon Wall. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio. You can download and listen to all episodes of Her Why on the BYU Radio app or wherever you find podcasts. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio.